I'm Clark Speaks, the catastrophic injury lawyer. Welcome to The Verdict. Hi, and welcome to The Verdict. I'm here with Brian Groesser. Brian is a lead workers' compensation attorney at Speaks Law Firm. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here. I've been looking forward to doing this.
Brian, first of all, can you tell me if a person is injured at work, what kinds of things should they be looking for in a lawyer? What kinds of strengths and skills and experience, and what should they be looking for?
I think experience is a big thing. I think it absolutely is, because there are a lot of things in the world of workers' comp that are different than any other area of the law. There's a lot of quirky aspects to the law. And when you mentioned at the beginning, just because you were injured at work, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a compensable case. A lot of people, employers and employees, think, well, I got injured at work. It's workers' comp. It's automatically covered. No, it has to be an injury by accident. And then it has to arise out of and within the course and scope of the employment. And so just simply getting injured at work isn't enough. You have to meet that criteria to even have a claim in the first place. And so having an experienced lawyer, I think, is the number one thing. But number two, having someone who knows the system, that knows the system in and out. And if they have experience on the other side, I think that's helpful, right? And somebody that knows what the adjuster is going to be doing, what the employer is going to be doing. So I think having experience and knowledge of the law, obviously, but knowing what the other side is going to be doing, I think helps immensely. And in my experience has been on doing this plaintiff side work, it's helped a lot in terms of being able to know the value of the case, being able to know what the adjuster is going to be willing to do, whether they're really going to go to a hearing or they're going to be ready to settle. All those aspects really help. I think those are the two main things, what I would
Well,
say.
in terms of the experience, you said just because you're hurt at work doesn't mean that it's necessarily compensable. It's got to be an accident and it's got to be in the scope of employment. Are those things sometimes in dispute? And if they are in dispute, can we influence the outcome of the decision on those issues?
100%. Those are always in dispute. I mean, if you're going to talk about the number one reason why somebody denies a case, it's one of those three things: that it wasn't an accident, that it didn't arise out of the employment, and that it wasn't within the course and scope. Those are the three main denials. There are other denials where you talk about intoxication and other aspects, kind of nuanced defenses. But for the most part, those are the three main defenses that an insurance carrier is going to put out there. And so it's vital to know, having an attorney that knows what can classify as an accident versus what might not classify as an accident is vital, because you need to know the truth at the outset of your case. Do you have a case or not, right? You don't want to spend all your time and energy on a case that doesn't really exist because you didn't have an accident. It was
Well, if
just
it's close, you need somebody with the experience who can then maybe push and advocate and
push it
knows
over.
what evidence to develop in order to secure a favorable outcome.
100% accurate.
Okay, so experience is one thing. What's something else? You know, if you need somebody who has experience in workers' compensation, who has experience in workers' compensation. I think you mentioned from the side of the defense is critical, and then also from the side of the plaintiff. What are other things in addition to experience, and that would be important?
People skills, to be honest with you. I mean, you are working with this attorney, hand in hand for the duration of your case. Your case may be open for 3 months. It may be open for 2 years. I think most cases tend to be open for about a year, year, maybe a year and a half is the length of most cases. But in my opinion, no matter what you're doing, whether it's with a legal representative or a realtor or whatever business deal you're working, I feel like experience matters, obviously, but you also have to like the person that you're working with, I think, because you're dealing with them. You're putting a lot of trust in their hands to handle your case. And in workers' comp, it's your livelihood. I mean, you have claimants that don't have a check coming in because the carrier has denied their case and they don't have any money coming in. So they're putting their full faith and credit into you as their representative to fix that and to be able to get them money so that they can pay those bills and everything. And so the experience and the knowledge comes in, but you've got a lot of communication that happens. And they don't really teach you that in law school, right? They don't really teach you the communication side of it. But especially in our line of work, we're taking phone calls and we're doing emails every day with our clients. And you develop a personal relationship with them. And I think people skills, if there's one complaint, the number one complaint that a client has about an attorney is the lack of communication, not hearing from them, their attorney not knowing what's going on in their case, not hearing from them. You got to have people skills. You got to have somebody that's responsive.
And so we can appreciate that, right? Like, imagine being hurt, your livelihood is at stake, you're dependent on this, in order to be able to pay your bills. And then, and then really what you're dependent on it is to be able to take care of your family, right? You're trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for rent, for car payments, for Little League dues, for school lunches, for the different things that we have to pay for in our lives when my income source has been eliminated. And so they're dependent on you. So you mentioned um you mentioned experience, you mentioned
Knowing
people
what the other
skills,
side's going to be doing.
knowing what the other side's going to be doing, people skills, communication, I think is a big part of it that you just mentioned, trustworthiness. What about credibility with the other side? What part does that play in it? If you're known as somebody who does what they say they're going to do, then is that, I imagine that that's helpful in most areas of the law. Does that apply in workers' compensation as well?
Absolutely. Workers' comp is different than other areas of the law. Like, say, for instance, and I tell people this all the time. You slip and fall at a retail store. Let's just say hypothetically, you slip and fall at Target as a customer, right? That's an all or nothing type situation, right? We're in a negligent state, and if you're partially negligent at all, you could recover nothing, and you could recover $100,000. You could recover $1 million. Whatever the value of your case is, that leads to a lot of contentiousness between the two sides, the two attorneys, because there's a lot on the line. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot on the line in comp. It's a different type of line, though, because typically there's going to be some semblance of recovery. It's just a matter of how much. It's very rare that there's a $0 nothing value case. There may be a nominal value case, but you're always going to, with few exceptions, recover something out of it. And so the question is, how much are you going to be able to recover? And a lot of that, in my opinion, does hinge on the credibility of the attorneys that are dealing with the case. If you have credibility with the other side, they're going to be more willing and able to listen to your arguments when you go to a mediation or when you eventually go to a hearing or risk going to a hearing. I'd much rather go to a hearing against somebody that doesn't really have great experience or doesn't have great credibility, because their reputation is not only known amongst the bar in terms of the people that are practicing, but also up at the industrial commission, right? There, if you have respect, if you have credibility within the industry, people are going to respect and give credence to your opinion on a case and say, you know what, that's probably right. Or there are some defenses I didn't think about, or there are some issues I didn't think about that he brought up, and we should consider them. That's the key. I mean, it's all a negotiation. When you're talking about 90% of cases settling before they ever go to a hearing. On TV, we see that, going to a jury all the time, the trial and all. You imagine doing that in law school too, that you're always going to be litigating, going, it just doesn't happen. In the real world, it doesn't happen that much. In workers' comp, 75% of cases settle at mediation. Of those that don't, 90% overall settle before you ever get to a hearing. It's very rare that you actually get to a hearing at the industrial commission. And so most of your cases are going to be resolved through negotiation through the attorneys. And if your attorney doesn't have credibility, it's going to be hard for you to negotiate because the other side's not going to take you seriously.
What part does preparation play in resolving cases for clients uh, quickly and for the most value?
It's absolutely vital. And it's true on both sides, both for the attorney and for the employee, to be prepared early on. And there are different ways. I mean, as an attorney, I don't get a phone call typically until weeks after an injury, maybe even months after an injury takes place. So there's preparation that needs to be done on the employee's side before they even make a phone call to me. But from my standpoint, we're preparing from the time that we first pick up the phone in the office and start taking the information from the potential client as to what's happening in the case. So being prepared, you have to be prepared if you want to have a successful outcome in your case.
Thank you, Brian. In the next episode, we'll talk about the very first things that you should do after a workplace accident. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us to stay up to date with our weekly episodes. We'll see you next time.